So just a final additional segment. Chef AJ, who's that with you?
Well, this is my anxiety doll. And so if you saw the movie Inside Out 2, this is anxiety. She's been driving the bus for years, but now we are the best of friends and I love her. We even look alike. I even dyed my hair to look just like her.
And I bet she gets to take a break now and again, and maybe you're riding the back seat of the bus together.
Absolutely. But I love her to pieces now because I know now that all she was doing was trying to protect me.
Yes, yes. And she worked really, really hard at it. Yes. No wonder she's so strung out.
People are going to think I'm even weirder than they thought before.
Impossible.
Listen, she even talks.
Hello, everybody. I'm anxiety. I'm one of Riley's new emotions.
Beautiful. As a vegan, do you ever feel like you're living in a parallel universe, aware of things that many others don't even seem to notice, let alone acknowledge? I'm Chrissy Benson, host of the Vegan Posse podcast. We talk with vegans from around the globe who, like you, are living lives of integrity and compassion with an eye toward justice. Through their personal stories, you'll come to see that you're not an outlier. In fact, you're part of an entire posse of individuals who aren't just keeping the peace, they're creating it through their food choices and beyond. You won't be saddling up, but you're in for the ride of your life. Welcome to the Vegan Posse. Hey Posse, I'm your host, Chrissy Benson. First, if you haven't yet, grab lots of copies of my novel, Marrying Myself, for yourself and for all your family and friends. It's got a vegan protagonist, a revolutionary self-love message, and it was featured in Veg News magazine. With your help, we can make Marrying Myself an Amazon bestseller and normalize veganism through the arts. Check out my website, ChristineMelanieBenson.com, for all the info. Next, if you're interested in doing some personal work in the form of internal family systems therapy, I can help. Email me at christinembenson@gmail.com for a free consultation or to schedule an appointment. Now, to kick off the new year, I'm delighted to bring you the incomparable, funny, endearingly authentic Chef AJ, who's been teaching people to cook and prepare delicious, healthy vegan food for decades. But Chef AJ initially went vegan not for health reasons, but to help animals. Chef AJ recently came out publicly with some upsetting health news. She's been diagnosed with lung cancer. Of course, all of us are going to die someday, so it's not news that we're all infected with the fatal condition known as humanity. In this interview, you'll get to hear how Chef AJ has been dealing with everything on her mind and heart, and I think you'll come away feeling both moved and inspired as to how to live. I know I did. So enjoy this conversation with the one-of-a-kind Chef AJ. All right, Chef AJ, welcome back to the Vegan Posse. Are you ready for the ride of your life?
I think I had the ride of my life on August 6, 1982, when I rode a mechanical bull and broke my back. So this might be the second ride of my life.
Yes, yes. You survived that one, and you've had a few wild rides these past few years. As a lot of people listening know, you've been dealing with some health issues. And in fact, when you were previously on the Vegan Posse, which was a little over a year ago for a fabulous interview, we were thrilled to have you. You had mentioned that you were dealing with some health issues at the time, but I was not aware of the extent or the nature. And just a few weeks ago, you went public with what's been going on with you. So would you just like to explain to listeners who may not be familiar, what you've been dealing with?
Sure. I came out, but not in the way that most people think. So I was diagnosed with lung cancer on April 15th, 2023. And I was going to just tell everybody, I didn't think it was that big of a deal, honestly, but I was advised by people that it's not a good idea to alarm people or worry them. There was a lot of reasons because I felt transparent with my persona, even though people don't really know who I am deeply. They make assumptions, but just in general, just being a YouTube personality and an author, I've always felt like I've always shared and told the truth. I mean, I never had anything quite as major as cancer, but even in my books, I told about, my abusive childhood and my bout with anorexia and things like that. And even just minor things, I've mentioned on my YouTube show, just in passing, I have TMJ, no big deal. I mean, I don't think these are big deals. People in the plant-based world that are what Dr. Doug Lisle calls hyper-conscientious nutcases might think it's a big deal, to have hypothyroidism, and God forbid.
Aren't you one of those, though? Aren't you a hyper-conscientious nutcase?
I have been, and I'm less so now, because when you get a terminal diagnosis and you realize that, all the kale can't save me now, I'm much more relaxed as far as that's concerned, the minutia. I got lost in the weeds for years, and now I am much more flexible with my diet and my life,
Amazing. Amazing. So tell us how you discovered this diagnosis. I mean,
Well,
as I understand it, you weren't having symptoms. You were feeling great. You're looking great still. You were then. So how did this all come about?
it's going to be interesting, because I don't know the end of the story, but it'll be interesting to see if it was a benefit for me to find out, because I am the kind of person that would have rather not known, because as you mentioned, I don't have symptoms. And by that, I mean pulmonary symptoms or symptoms of cancer. I do have the symptom of anxiety and terror since being told I have cancer, but I have had no pulmonary symptoms. So what happened is, in April of 2022, we moved from Southern California to Northern California because of some advice from Dr. Doug Lisle, who happens to live here, which is that a person's social ecology is pretty much one of the number one predictors of their happiness. And I was very unhappy in Southern California, not because I didn't love it. The weather was fantastic. There was so many things that are great about Southern California. And I'm not talking about LA, Southern California, where I lived till I was 60, but the desert, where we had moved for 3.5 years because we could never afford a house in LA. And you could get a mansion back then, for like, $200,000. And we did. It was our first house, and we could pick all the upgrades. It was fabulous. But we didn't really have a lot of friends, at least not vegan friends. And when you're vegan for almost 50 years, it's important for me to have people that are like-minded in terms of that. And unfortunately, we also moved right before the pandemic, which made it harder to even make friends during that time. We had about 6 vegan friends, which actually was enough. But after the pandemic, 2 of the couples moved. It left us with 1 couple, and they're great friends still today, Steve and Linda. Linda's my virtual assistant. They lived a block away from us when we lived in Sherman Oaks, but it wasn't enough for me. And for whatever reason, the Sacramento area is a mecca for health and veganism. I have no idea how they all landed here. All the vegan restaurants that make SOS-free food, the vegan doctors, they have Weimar up here. And my friend Linda Middlesworth, who you might want to interview sometime, because she's a firecracker. She's going to be 81 pretty soon. And she has something called the Sacramento Vegan Society. It has like close to 6,000 members. I have close to 2,000 in
Wow.
And so it's just amazing up here. We have these parties and picnics and potlucks every month, several of them a month, and we get routinely 100 people. It's amazing. And the community up here is just incredible. And so that's why I moved. Well,
and you've only been there 2 years. That's a recent change.
It's almost going to be 3 years. 3 years in
Almost
April.
3 years, but even still, I mean, that's pretty minuscule. Wow, I knew you had moved, and I was aware it was to find more community, but I didn't realize it was that relatively recent.
Yeah, but it was almost 3 years ago. And also, when I lived in the desert, I couldn't find a vegan doctor. And I had always had a vegan doctor in LA, and it in the desert, there wasn't like one, literally. And so up here, we have something called Weimar University, and Dr. Neil Nedley, he's an amazing vegan doctor. He's an internal medicine and a GI doctor, both of which I needed. And so I wanted to have that. And I see, listen, I go to doctors that aren't vegan, obviously. Very few of them are, but I wanted at least my internal medicine doctor, so to speak, the quarterback, to kind of, run the ship, if you will. I mean, I still see the True North doctors all the time virtually, but they're about 2 hours away. So it's not feasible for me to really go there for just my regular appointments. And so, when I found out that he took patients, I was like, okay, well, that's another great reason to move there. So yeah, it's an amazing place, but I needed a urologist. because I had what I thought was a UTI, which up until about 2 years ago, I was getting all the time. And actually, I solved that problem by interviewing a guest on my show named Dr. Rachel Rubin, who was an expert in that. And once I went on something called UVFM, I never, ever got another UTI. And I was getting them very often, and they were painful. And
Is that the topical hormone?
well, yeah, it can be topical, but I like it. I like it like in the shoot it up pill, because the cream is kind of messy. So this is a twice a week pill. You just kind of use this little shooter and you go. And
Okay, yeah, because I've listened to some of those interviews you have with Dr. Rubin. Yeah, fascinating and
he is
definitely great
amazing.
information.
And since I went on that, and I had never gotten another UTI, but this was not until November of 2022. So, and that's another reason I like seeing female urologists, because, I never was offered any of this by the male urologists. Not that they aren't good for some people, but I feel like I want to see the person that has my same parts, if possible. They can have a little bit of understanding. So occasionally I would get a UTI when I would go teach in Mexico. I have had the privilege since 2012 to teach hands-on cooking classes and occasionally lecture at this world-class spa called Rancho La Puerta. I actually took Dr. Lyle there once as my guest, and Dr. Goldhammer once, and his wife twice. It's an amazing, amazing place. It's not vegan, but you can get vegan food, the way you want it for the most part. And for whatever reason, sometimes travel would just give me a UTI. And so this was July 2022. And so I went in to see the urologist, and I believe it was like a Monday or a Tuesday. I said, I think I have a UTI, because I know what they feel like. I've never been wrong. I mean, it's like I've never had one and it wasn't. It's kind of like this very painful lower abdominal pain. And kind of, when you pee, it kind of is uncomfortable. And so he tested my urine in the office. They can do a little stick in the office. He said, oh, no, you don't have a UTI. You have interstitial cystitis. Well, I've since learned from people like Dr. Sultana and other doctors that the little stick in the office isn't always accurate. That really what you have to do is do what's called a urine culture, which takes a few days, and you have to send it to the lab. And I didn't know this because I'm not a doctor, and I trusted this doctor. And so he for 100 days, he treated me for a disease that I never had called interstitial cystitis, which, by the way, is a terrible disease. It's an autoimmune disease. There's no known cause. There's no cure. And I remember, asking Dr. McDougall what to do. And Dr. McDougall gave me his diet for it, which was basically, I lost so much weight. There was nothing I can eat because you had to cook your fruit. It was so limited, and it was so painful. And I had joined all these support groups for people with interstitial cystitis and heard their terrible stories. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't have this. I do not have this disease. It doesn't match up. I'm not feeling like they're feeling. I said, and so I went to, at the time, Dr. Nedley had an associate named Dr. Bussey, another wonderful doctor. I'm sad he moved back to, I think it was Ohio. And I said, look, I just can't believe I have this disease. And could you please look for other causes? Oh, by the way, when I finally got my appointment at True North with Dr. Sultana, he ordered a urine culture. And sure enough, all I had was a UTI, but now it was a raging UTI because it had gone untreated for 100 days. The minute
that is so frustrating. I mean, were you pissed, pun intended?
Yes, I was. And I thought about, and I actually even spoke to an attorney, and he said, you have a case, but the problem is you don't have damages. In other words, I didn't miss work for, so there was, yeah. And I've actually talked to several attorneys, and I decided for the, sake of my health, I was going to have to let it go. And I'm still having a little trouble with that. But, and I never confronted him about it or put a bad Yelp review. I was just so glad to be rid of him, because the treatment that he gave for interstitial cystitis was you had to go in every week for something called a bladder installation. And they put this catheter. The treatment was terrible, and it didn't even work, So, but, once Dr. Sultana was on the case and he did the culture, I took an antibiotic, and like within 24 hours, the pain of 100 days was gone. But by then I had seen a really top urologist at UCSD, Dr. Jennifer Enger, who was my urologist when I lived in LA. And she said, well, now you kind of have to stay on them for a little bit, the antibiotics, because there's some healing to be done. But as I mentioned, then I went on the UVFM, and I never, ever got another UTI. And it's been almost, it's been over 2 years with something that I was getting all the time, because I didn't know this, and I don't think a lot of the main doctors know that. So anyway, when I was in the under the illusion that I had interstitial cystitis, and I had asked my doctor, please look for some other cause of this lower abdominal pain, and this is, I think, Chrissy, the most important point of this story is people have to listen to their body. And if I had listened to, I mean, I should have fought. You really have to be your own advocate in
You
general.
do. Yeah.
Answer, do you really, really have to be your own advocate?
Yeah.
And so I should have fought harder. But like I said, it was new up here, and it is so hard, even to this day, to even get in to see your doctor, even Dr. Nedley. And I didn't know anybody at the time. And so that was part of the problem. But I would definitely be more of an advocate for myself, because I've never been wrong about this pain. And so I said, look for something else. So he ordered an abdominal CT scan with and without contrast. And the regular CT was okay, but the one with the iodine, I ended up, I don't know if I'm allergic or just what, but I was like vomiting. I didn't like that very much from the iodine. But anyway, the test showed everything was fine down there, the ovaries, the appendix, all that kind of stuff that they look at. They said, but they noticed that there were 4 millimeter, I don't think they called them tumors at that time. I think they were calling them nodules or spots on my liver and my lung. And so I said to the doctor, because, your lungs go pretty far down. And so all they were seeing was the very bottom of the lung. And 4 millimeters is infinitesimal. It's not, and there's a whole bunch of reasons that people can have spots or nodules. It can be old scarring. There's a lot of things can be that aren't cancer. And so I was told, don't worry. In 6 months, we're just going to do a lung CT scan and recheck it.
Why 6 months?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. That's what the recommendation was from both the regular doctor and the radiologist that read the results. They said, come back in 6 months. I guess because nobody was worried. 4 millimeters is that even a pencil dot? It's really, really, really small. And so when telling somebody with anxiety not to worry is like the funniest thing in the world, because of course all I did was worry. And I'm sure that doesn't contribute to my health, the fact that I do worry, but I didn't worry that much for the last 6 months. But there's this thing, if you ever meet anybody that has cancer or that recovered from cancer, even people that are much more emotionally stable than I do, there is a thing called scanxiety. It's anxiety pertaining to our PET scans, our CAT scans, MRIs that we so often have to get. So even very calm, stable people, usually up to a week or at least a day or two before the scan, then they start getting anxious, or until the results come, which could be in one or a few days afterwards. So I didn't want to have it before my birthday and ruin a birthday. My birthday is March 22nd. 6 months would have been March 22nd. So I had the test on March 23rd. And what it showed was a 14 millimeter, which is still quite small, actually. That's 1.4 centimeters. That's, I think, about the size of maybe a raisin or a blueberry. Spiculated tumor. Spiculated means spiked. And it showed that it was behind my heart, 2 millimeters from the aorta in the left lower lobe. And so they said, well, don't worry yet. And then they ordered something called a PET scan, which I had never had before. And the PET scan showed, and again, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know what these terms mean. If you have doctors watching, they will high SUV. It's some marker they measure. It was avid. It meant hot. And so that was on April 14th, which is a Friday of 2023. And on April 15th, a Saturday, literally 20 minutes before I was supposed to go live with a very special show on Chef AJ Live, I got this ding on my phone. Oh, your results are in. It's called My Health Online. And this drives me crazy that they give you results before the doctor even sees them.
Oh, boy. Wow.
It basically said lung cancer. And I'm like, and there's nobody to talk to on a Saturday. The soonest I could have seen anybody was Monday. And so if you watch that episode, it's funny because it's really funny because that episode of that day was my former acting teacher. It was a special show in honor of her 88th birthday. And I was watching the beginning the other day because she had called me and I said, boy, I really am a good actress, because for me to feel the way I felt having been diagnosed with cancer and then having to do a show all smiles and everything, I'm like, boy, I guess you did teach me something, Joni. So that's when it all began. And this is that's basically the start of it. I wasn't that worried at the beginning because I was told not to worry. But the fact that it grew this last checkup, at first they wanted to do scans every 3 months, and I don't want all that radiation. And also, my copays are huge, and it's like, I didn't want to have to do that. I did it the first time. I think we did a scan in 6 weeks, and then we did it in 3 months. And I said, look, we got to just do these less frequently. And most of the people were okay with that. But of course, they wanted to do aggressive treatment right away. But here's the thing. I could not get an oncologist to see me for 1.5 years from that date in April. And the reason is because they wanted what was called a tissue biopsy. Now, at the time, my tumor was very small, and I have had a tissue biopsy just recently, as a matter of fact, but I don't have the results quite yet to share with you. But when my tumor was that small, even the interventional radiologist who did the procedure on me almost a week ago said, at 14 millimeters, it would have been extremely, extremely hard for me to hit. Now at 28 millimeters, I think I'm going to be able to get it. And so nobody really wanted me to get a needle biopsy. It's called a core needle biopsy as opposed to a fine needle biopsy back then, because it was small, and because the thoracic oncology surgeon who I saw, his advice was, okay, let's just take it out. I can't get clean margins because of where it is. We'll just do a lobectomy of your left lower lobe. And I'm like, I don't really want that. I said, I have COPD. My pulmonary function tests are not that good. And I have a terrible, not just fear. It's what's a fear when you have it like phobia.
Like a phobia.
Yeah, because I had almost died from an operation in my teens when I was allergic to the general anesthesia. And so he's like, okay, well, then I'm going to send you to a radiation oncologist and you can have radiation. And it's interesting because up until recently, when they found that I had one metastases in my bronchial lymph node, the surgeon was perfectly okay doing the surgery without a biopsy, without knowing for sure if it was even cancer. And so was the radiation oncologist willing to radiate without knowing for sure. But I wanted a real, not that they're not real oncologists, I wanted what's called a medical oncologist, because they're kind of like the ones driving the ship, because all the supportive services that I've since been able to get, like being in support groups, like a free wig, things like that, without a medical oncologist, it's almost like you don't exist, at least in my hospital system. And so I paid $2,200 in December of 2023 for what's called a blood biopsy, a liquid biopsy. And it showed I had lung adenocarcinoma. And because of that, I finally found an oncologist that would see me. But again, the wait was so long. It took a very long time to see her. Wow. And in the meantime, this thing is growing and all that kind of thing. But everybody, when I say everybody, I'm not talking about some of the alternative or holistic or plant-based people, although there are plant-based doctors that are very, very much wanting me to do the traditional treatment in addition to anything else I might do for my mind, body, or spirit. But the surgery just sounded terrible to me. Having just had a pneumothorax from a lung biopsy and having to be on oxygen and still having a little trouble breathing, I can't imagine losing my left lower lobe is going to be a piece of kale. So I'm not really interested in that, at least not right now. But that's apparently the gold standard. I had looked into what's called radiation, because I have had friends that have had cancer that have had that instead of surgery, and they seem to be doing well, and it didn't seem to hurt them or have a lot of side effects. So I met with a radiation oncologist, and she said that I needed a special kind of radiation that they didn't do here at Sutter called proton beam, which is only available certain places like Loma Linda and MD Anderson and a few other places. I think UCSF and maybe Stanford. But until I get Medicare, which won't be for a couple months, it's ridiculously expensive, and the insurance didn't pay. And so that was like strike number one, strike number two. And then, so then I finally get to the medical oncologist. And so here's the thing. Without tissue, if I do decide to go to conventional treatment, you can't just throw a bunch of drugs and guess. Or even if I want to do what Dr. Goldhammer thinks would be safe for me to do, which is called immunology, which actually supports the immune system as opposed to destroying it. They don't guess with these drugs. You have to have some tissue so that they can figure out, the genetic type and all that kind of stuff. And so up until I had this last set of CAT scans and PET scans, which was actually on October 18th, the day that I went into True North to attempt a second water fast to see if I could shrink these tumors, I didn't have what's called a MET or metastases. They only had one. I mean, one is enough, trust me, because of that, I jumped from stage 1 to stage 3, like literally overnight. I mean, the good news, I suppose, is this met is in the bronchial lymph node, which means it's really close to the tumor, which means most people think it's the same cancer, not another cancer, because it's not in another body part like my brain and bones. Thank God, because I recently had a brain MRI to make sure it wasn't in my cancer, and the cancer wasn't in brain or bones, and it wasn't. So I'm really, really thankful for
So
that.
just to backtrack a minute, just, can you maybe do like a little cancer 101? Like I'm assuming I know the gist of a lot of these terms, but I may be off. And so people listening, just
Yeah,
to understand. So you have the initial tumor, which was that it was initially what, four
millimeters,
millimeters, and then it grew to,
it grew to
yeah,
28. But what people have to
20.
understand, that's called the doubling time. The doubling time didn't happen since the last scan. It happened since it was found. So basically,
Mm.
so if March 2023, it was 14, and then October 2024. So it took a year and a half to double. So
So that sounds good, right? That sounds
yeah, a
positive.
lot of
Yeah.
tumors they double every 100 days. So
Wow.
this
Wow.
was about 351. This was about 525 days to double. So it's
Okay.
still considered
So,
slow growing, but
okay. So there's just the one so far as they can tell, and the test of the what metastasizing means is basically that the cancer
has
shows
moved.
up in other parts of your body.
Right. So it's moved outside the primary tumor, but it didn't move far. It moved right next door to a bronchial lymph node. And that is something they want to biopsy too. But I'm not ready for that yet because that
Hmm.
requires general anesthesia. Whereas the
Oh.
procedure I had, I was able to do either with light sedation or I did it actually with nothing. And it was fine.
Oh,
It really,
wow.
I know. And this is what cracks me up is people, people say I'm anxious. I think having to take these anesthetic drugs and these sedation drugs are more anxiety provoking than just doing it without. And I was even able to do an endoscopy with Dr. Nedley this year. He always tells his other patients about me with no sedation. Now that wasn't easy, and I really don't recommend it. And colonoscopy without it, I don't recommend it. But for whatever I say mishigas because I don't know what the word is. That's a Jewish word for craziness. It's my
It's
fear
a
is
great word. I love that word. Meshuggah, how do you spell it?
mishigas. I'm not sure, but like in Yiddish, crazy means meshugana, and it's like we use it kind of almost in an endearing way in our family. But whatever my fear is, it's not so much about the procedures; it's about the anesthesia. And also, I had a
Mhm.
really my father would not let us have Novocaine when we were little and we had our teeth drilled. And so I think that kind of set me up with a lot of fear and anxiety around doctors and being put
Mhm.
to sleep and things like that. So it's been actually harder for me than a lot of people because I think a lot of people, actually most people that I've talked to would have just done what the doctor said right away. Okay, you got this
Mhm.
spot, let's take it out. If it's not cancer, yay. But if it is, we got it.
Mhm. Mhm. So where does it stand now? It's good that it didn't move far. It's bad
Yeah.
that it moved, but it's good
Yeah.
that it didn't move far. That's a good sign.
So where it stands now is we wait for what's called the biopsy results, assuming he was able to get enough tissue. If he didn't, I guess we have to go through that again, which I don't really want to do. There was nothing to eat at the hospital. That was my biggest.
Ugh.
I mean, I had a choice of a turkey sandwich, pudding, jello, or a popsicle. I said, "Do you have any fruits or vegetables?" Oh no, we don't have any fresh produce here.
That
So
was the popsicle. That was their fruit.
yeah, I said, yeah. So, and it's funny because I had since been to the cafeteria and they do have fruits and vegetables there. So, for whatever reason, they were not able to provide them to me.
Interesting. Again, another just, indicator of the quality of our healthcare and just the compartmentalization and lack of
Absolutely.
awareness. Boy, very frustrating. I mean, like like you, I'm sure, like a lot of us, I just generally do my best to avoid the medical world completely, and that works great. But it's funny the times when you do kind of have to check in, and then it's a real reality check as to how things are. And so just what you're describing, like those food options, that right there says so much.
I had food with me, by the way, but I mean, I just felt,
Yeah.
paying a lot of money for this. Can I have a snack?
Totally. No, it's just disheartening, and it doesn't inspire confidence,
Right.
because clearly they have no clue what these so-called foods, do to our bodies and the cause of these chronic diseases. So, well, you seem like you feel good and you seem in great spirits. How are you doing with all of this? And
Well,
what
I
have
mean,
you made of this?
again, I mean, right now I am, but you didn't catch me this morning, when I was bawling my eyes out because, it comes in waves. It's kind of like if you've ever had grief. Even if you're grieving, you don't necessarily have every single minute of the day in grief. You might have moments of joy or moments of exhilaration, and that's kind of what it is. So I try not to think about it. I mean, I am nervous. I am scared, but I can't live every single second of my life in terror because then I have no quality of life.
Yeah.
It's like most of the doctors are only interested in the length of your life as opposed to the quality of your life. And that's the hardest thing to make the surgeons and the oncologists understand, because they haven't been able to really show me much evidence that all the things they want to do are going to really help me live any longer or any better. And part of the reason is they can't really study this in terms of, you can't take a group. And that's the other thing with cancer. Everybody's is different. It's not like there is a cancer, even a lung cancer, and everyone reacts differently to drugs and things like that. But they can't really do a study if they take a group of people with it and then some of them have treatment, some of them don't. And we see who lives, because most people, I think, do elect to get some type of treatment. I mean, and so it's not something they say they can ethically study. But if I'm going to live, if I'm going to live a month longer, it's
Right.
not worth
Right.
it.
Right. Well, you've mentioned Dr. John McDougall, who, a lot of us are familiar with, and I know you were very close with him, but that was a piece of medical wisdom that I really absorbed from him, was to ask that very question. Okay, you're recommending these treatments. They have these statistical results in terms of maybe they can show it does something positive with some numbers somewhere, but ask the question, does it extend lifespan? And that's a question that a lot of people don't even know to ask.
Right.
So it's great that you asked that. But kind of on a side note, I mean, as most people listening know, sadly, Dr. John McDougall died last year at the age of 78. Is that right?
I
He was
believe,
78.
I think he had only turned 77, if I'm not mistaken. 1947 he was born, so he was 77. A few months.
Wow. Okay. And did you have, as a friend of his, as a colleague, did you have any sense that he was sick or that the time
So
was near?
everybody's asking me that like they were doing some kind of covert operation and hiding something. He really did die peacefully in his sleep on Saturday, June 22nd. And I had talked to him 2 days before because he was so kind. I could Zoom with him anytime I had questions or was scared, and he seemed to be fine. And
Yeah.
I made
Yeah.
an email from him, like the day before, because I was trying to get this doctor named H. Gilbert Welch on my show who talks about the overtreatment of cancer. So
Mm.
yeah, people are always looking for some kind of conspiracy or story, and it's just not that. I do want to say though, one thing about conventional treatment is that if you're having symptoms, it might be a good idea. So in other words, if you can't breathe and if that tumor is so big, it's pressing on your, your bronchial tube, I would consider it very much so to do that. But it's hard for me to just jump into something that I know could make me sick or even kill me when I don't have symptoms. But what
Right.
they're saying and when I say they, not just the medical doctors, but the people in my cancer support groups, is that for a lot of people, cancer has no symptoms until it's so advanced. And so
Mhm.
that's why it's just
Mhm.
been very difficult to make this decision because there are so
Yeah.
many, everybody has, God bless them all, they've given me suggestions and books and people to talk to. I'm going to be 65 in a few months. I don't have the time left to investigate every single place that treats cancer in the world or
Right.
read every single book. And
Right.
so I appreciate that. The thing is I'm finding that if people, I'm really mostly interested in people that have my type of cancer, lung cancer,
Mhm.
what they did, because there's a lot of people
Mhm.
that have recovered from all different kinds of cancers. And I would like to be able to like believe that if I do what you do, I'll get better, but I don't know, and I
Yeah.
don't know what I
Yeah.
should do because I can do nothing, which is what I've been doing. And that worked okay. But now I'm questioning whether that was the best decision because
Mhm.
what traditional doctors say is that you're making it harder to treat. And it could be to the point where we can't treat it if you don't do something. And I'm really more afraid of being abandoned by them if I really need them. I'm told
Oh,
I can't really do that. but I feel like, oh man, like, to give you an example, I broke my back 40 years ago, and I have this thing in my back. My spine got crushed, so I have this kyphosis, and I've had chronic pain for years.
Yeah,
And
we talked about that last time you were on the show. It
people
sounds
feel
horrific.
she's
Yeah.
and that's why she leans forward. No, that's not why. It's because I was in an accident at L2, L1, and so it got this curvature. But for the most part, it's been fine. I use physical therapy and massage and heat. But when I moved up here, the weather's so cold, it's been hurting more. So I want to just get this kind of injection. It's not surgery. It's just this targeted injection. And so I finally, after 6 months, got into a pain management doctor. He goes, "Oh, I can't help you now because you have cancer. We have, I'm like, what? What do you mean? Oh, no, you have to get your cancer treated." And it's like, you're not my oncologist. I'm here. It's like, it's almost having like a C, like a scarlet C on my
Oh
chest.
boy.
Because now I go to a doctor. The only one that doesn't treat me like a cancer patient is my podiatrist. I love him. He just like, he tells me inspiring stories about a relative he has with lung cancer that's doing well. But the rest of them are like, "Aren't you treating it? You didn't do it." It's like, it doesn't matter what the specialty is, because it's almost like
Wow.
my chart. It's like being on parole in a way. It's like almost like
Wow.
flagged. And it's like, I don't know if like these alarms go off when I see them, but that's been a little bit frustrating. So,
Oh, it sounds enormously frustrating. Yeah.
so I mean, I really don't know what to do. And this is where I really became very more introspective, and I guess more spiritual, or just, waiting for some kind of divine sign or intervention as to what I should do, or hoping that the people that will know what I should do will be placed in my path, because I really like the more gentle types of treatment. If there is some like immunotherapy, or, the things that they do kind of like in the clinics in Mexico, but, those are very expensive, by the way, and they don't take insurance. And so
Right.
it's just, I feel like, what was that fabulous actor's name? Michael Caine. And I think the movie was Juggernaut. I think I was like 10 when I saw it. And I think it was on a submarine, and the pivotal scene at the end, I think there was like a red wire and a black wire, or a blue wire. And if he cut one wire, the ship would blow up, and the other wire, that scene. And that's kind of how I feel about my treatment, because I don't want to make the wrong choice. So
Sure.
maybe I'll do a little bit of both, a little conventional with a little,
Mhm.
and I don't know why it's called unconventional or holistic,
Right.
Try both. But see, then again, when you do a lot of things like that, how do you know which one works? So
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
know.
it doesn't really matter as long as one works, right?
That's
I
what
mean,
works. That's,
maybe for research, it would be helpful
I
to
don't know if
know.
I can say this on your show, but there's an old saying: throw enough shit against the wall, and something's going to stick.
See what sticks. Exactly. Exactly. And just to clarify, when I was asking about Dr. John McDougall, I wasn't asking because I was getting at some kind of conspiracy, thing that happened. It was just more to understand if his death caught you off guard, or
Oh
if
my
you
God, yes.
knew that he was,
I did not
sick and
know.
in
Of course,
decline.
I mean, I
Yeah.
received a text from his wife, and oh my God, it devastated me, and I'm still like missing him so much, especially around the holidays. Absolutely, no one, I think, ever expected him to. We just thought he would live forever.
Yeah.
Same thing
Yeah.
happened the year before with another friend and mentor, Dr. Hans Deal. 77. They've taken too young for. But look, we've got other people in the plant-based world, like Dr. Colin Campbell and Dr. Caldwell B. Esselstyn. They're like 91, and they're rocking it.
I know. Dr. Campbell was on the show not too long ago, and he's got another book coming out. I mean, it's incredible. And I mean, the thing that I always keep in mind too is, we say we don't know how things will turn out. Well, we know that as humans, I think it's Dr. Goldhammer who puts it this way. We've got a terminal condition called humanity, meaning that we'll all die. And I remember talking to my sweet cat Sammy when he was in his final months, and just saying to him, "Sammy, it's going to happen to me too. It's just happening to you first."
Mm-hmm.
So the bottom line is, we're all, and I practice Buddhism and have had a meditation practice for a long time. And go ahead, yeah.
No, go ahead. I just remember to ask you something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that one of the practices that's recommended in that philosophical and spiritual tradition is to proactively contemplate your own death, and to just stay in touch with that reality on a consistent daily basis. And it's counterintuitive, right? Because we don't want to think about the time that we'll die, that we'll leave the earth, that our bodies will just fall apart and stop working. but paradoxically, it ends up being freeing, and it ends up, freeing us to enjoy life. And, if this really is our last day on earth, well, all the more reason to make the most of it and enjoy it rather than worry about it. So it's counterintuitive, but I wonder if you've experienced, just a little taste of maybe those benefits, just in contemplating, the end that we'll all be facing, no one accepted.
I don't think I've gotten quite that far in contemplating demise, but I've accepted that I might die sooner than I had wanted or expected. And so what that has done for me is gotten me to the business of living. And Dr. Lyle has said this even before my diagnosis about how, at my age, I maybe have 100,000 hours left, and how do I want to spend them? So I've completely changed my focus, both in terms of my work and in terms of how I spend my time and who I spend my time with, because it's always been precious. It's just that I didn't have the awareness,
Right.
And there's a saying that sometimes you have to be willing to give up the life you wanted to live the life that you're meant to live. I don't know if I have that exactly right, but it's kind of like, well, I guess if I am here to help people, now this is how I'm going to help them. And I'm just going to, keep doing it. It's incredible to me how, so many people are so kind. I would say the response to my coming out, if you will, or revealing my diagnosis has been like 99.9% positive, but there still are some people, and it really, it's so peculiar to me, especially when they're vegans and we basically have a lot of the same beliefs and the same diet. I haven't watched them, by the way. So if you're watching this, I haven't seen your video, but they've made like videos about me, like speculating. They're not even doctors. Why I got cancer. It's pathetic. It really is.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really, people with, I've heard some of the doctors like Alan Goldhammer and Dr. Lyle talk about how, of course, people are trying to figure out how, what you did wrong so that, they can figure out a way not to do it. But it's so toxic. It strikes me as people who are not living.
What I did wrong, if you believe in reincarnation. I don't, but I did in my last life. Ha ha. What I did wrong is I didn't have very good parents, because people, and this is the other thing about these HCNCs, of which I was one for many years, the hyper conscientious nutcases, people seem to forget in the plant-based world that we can't run our genetics. Yes, we can modify genes sometimes with diet, but people don't take into account how strong genetics are. And how many people in my family have already died of cancer? A lot. Grandfather, father, uncle, brother, and more, actually.
Wow.
So, I guess I'm lucky to be living as long as I have and as well as I have. And who knows all the places that I lived, growing up in. I lived in some pretty bad dives in LA. That's what I could afford. And I remember one of the places I lived, not my apartment, but the neighbor's apartment, had mold. So maybe I had it too, but I didn't know. I don't know. But, I can't go back. But before I forget, I heard you say, I don't remember, but maybe it was an interview with Jen Hawk, but you talked about, I think you're an IFS therapist or something like that.
Yes.
So
yes.
I think I'm doing that now. I'm not 100% sure, because the practitioner I'm doing it with, I never even thought to ask him his credentials, but because it's so weird to me and so woo-woo, even though I like woo-woo, that the best way he explained it to me was like the movie Inside Out.
And yes, it's IFS. I can tell you already. Yeah.
He had me watch 1 and 2. And so this is a guy that's been helping me so much in terms, not helping me make decisions about what I'm supposed to do for my cancer or even cure my cancer, but he's been helping my emotional state so much with these sessions. And it's just amazing. And I can't say enough about it, especially if you find the right practitioner. I know that Dr. Lyle will think it's ridiculous, but
right. Dr. Lyle has definitely dismissed and kind of diminished internal family systems therapy. But yes, I'm a big believer, and I do think it's consistent with evolutionary psychology. It's essentially, a lot of people listening will be familiar with it, but essentially it's working with the different parts of yourself as if they're people, and you learn that, for instance, an anxious part is once you start communicating with that part and talking to it and finding out what's going on, you inevitably find out that part is working really hard to try to protect you.
Yeah.
And it's doing that job because it thinks it has to. not even because it wants to. It thinks it's necessary and it thinks it's helping. And if you can update that part and talk to that part and help it realize, oh, okay, maybe you thought you were protecting a vulnerable 5-year-old. You don't realize I'm an adult. I've been managing for quite some time. You can take a break. You can take a break. And they can learn new skills. They can learn new ways of applying their assets and abilities. That anxious part can set its abilities to making sure you get your taxes in on time rather than constantly scoping for danger lurking every place you walk into. So yeah, so what parts have you discovered in yourself, AJ, if you're comfortable talking about
Yeah,
it?
absolutely. Well, I have my little anxiety doll from the movie Inside Out too over there. But of course, she's been running the show, driving the bus for most of my life. And so I've gotten to know her really well and have compassion for her. And the funny thing is when I do these sessions, and I was doing and I still see him once or twice a week. He's just an amazing human. I call him a magic unicorn because I don't really understand what he does. But I go to these sessions thinking, this is bullshit. This is stupid. And then afterwards, I always feel better. I can't explain it,
Yeah,
and
I
I
feel
go,
the same way even as a practitioner. It all seems so strange and so kind of, imaginary friend and sort of fantasy world, but it really has an impact.
for me, it's been very healing. But I find, even if people are open to it, to trying it now that I've mentioned the benefit it's had, it's not the kind of thing like here's the thing. The great thing about Dr. Doug Lisle is, and for a lot of people, he's a one and done. Like if you have a particular problem, like a relationship or your boss or a neighbor, you can go to him for a half hour or 60 minutes and he will fix that problem. He will solve it. But with IFS work or parts work, it's not just one time and you're done, because it might be done for that particular day, that part. So I feel if people don't commit to, I would say at least 10 sessions, maybe 5, they're not
Mm-hmm.
going to know if it has any benefit for them, because it is really weird. And so the
Mm-hmm.
person that referred me to this type of work, he is a very renowned plant-based doctor. And he said, look, this is really weird, but will you trust me and just do it? And I'm like, sure, you know. And I still think it's weird. Do you have any good books to read? I read Dr. Schwartz's book, but is there a better, not that his wasn't good, but I still really don't even understand it. Like when my
Yeah.
practitioner says, well, you're blended with that part. And I'm like, of course I am. I really feel like I am that part. Of course I'm
Mm-hmm.
blended with it.
Right, right. Yeah, well, Dick Schwartz, who's the creator of IFS, he's got a few books. I'm not sure which one you've read, and honestly, I haven't read them all
I read
either.
No Bad Parts on Audible. Or I listened.
Okay,
Yeah.
I would probably recommend like his very first book, which is something about an introduction to IFS, and then there's also an interesting book. I can't remember if he wrote it or if somebody else wrote it, but it's about doing IFS on yourself,
Yeah.
which I don't think is quite as effective, generally speaking, as working with somebody else. But there's a lot of value that can be gleaned from it. And one of the things that I love about IFS is kind of what you were getting at, is that it's not a doctor fixing you. So it's not hierarchical. It's not going to a counselor, a psychologist, spilling forth all your angst and your issues and then being issued this diagnosis and being, quantified in terms of what your neurosis is and then how to fix that. Not that if that's useful, then that's great, but IFS is fantastic. And one of the things that really appealed to me is that it's so egalitarian. It's the therapist doesn't have answers, the therapist has questions, and all the wisdom and all the answers is coming from within the client. So in your case, from you, or if I'm the client, from me and my parts. And I think it really, for that reason, it has kind of the side effect of boosting self-esteem and empowerment. Because in addition to sorting through these issues that we came in with and are trying to work on, it also helps us realize that, oh, we are the source. It's all within us. Like nobody else gave this to me. They helped me tap into it, but it was me. It was me. And I think that's possibly even potentially more valuable than the process itself of the parts.
Yeah. It has helped me calm down quite a bit. I mean, I maybe
Mm,
other people may not notice that in me if they don't know me all the time. But, the fact that I was even able to get the biopsy showed that this work had a profound impact, because at first it was like, I'm not doing anything, I'm not going anywhere.
Right.
I was able to calm down enough, and I was such a good patient. That's the other thing. It's one thing to be able to go, but to be like you can't move during a needle biopsy, by the way. And that work really helped, because I had a session right, the night before and everything like that. And I knew,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I love hearing people talk about IFS, and it's so exciting for me when people discover it for themselves, and the power and the utility of it. But on a slightly different note, I'm just curious, Chef AJ, because you've been eating, whole food, plant-based, SOS free, very, very healthy for a long time. I'm just wondering if at any point, throughout this process of receiving this diagnosis and going through what you've been dealing with lately, if you felt betrayed by your diet,
Oh
just
my God! Immediately. I mean, one of my one of my first thoughts is, if I knew I was going to get cancer, I wouldn't have eaten so damn much kale. I don't even like kale. So I did feel that way. I felt like, this is so unfair. Because here's the other thing, though. I did not always eat a perfect Goldhammer diet. That's only in pretty recent history. I would say Goldhammer perfect since about January 2nd, 2012. August 1st, 2008, I went SOS free, but I was, and it wasn't that it was Goldhammer imperfect, but I was doing a lot of the high fat foods, still including a lot of nut butters. That's why I couldn't get my weight down. So let's say 2008. So yeah, till I was diagnosed, that was more than 15 years of pretty close to dietary perfection. But who knows what the outcome would be if I ate less healthfully. And
right.
what people don't understand is, for the tumor has to be there a long time before it's discovered. And Dr. Letterman tried to make a point on the show, and maybe you'll link to it, Breaking the Silence,
Sure.
lung cancer diagnosis to you, that everybody has cancer in their body. You have it right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
But it's not perceptible by the CAT scan machine or the x-ray machine right now. And so for it to even show up, it would have had to been there, Dr. McDougall guessed like 10 or 20 years, right? So
Wow.
I was raised on the standard American diet. I became vegan at 17. That was in 1977. For the first 26 years of my vegan diet, it was a junk food vegan diet. I was obese. So it's not like I had this lifelong dietary perfection like Dr. Goldhammer's son Gar, right? I think I think the people in the plant-based world believe that if you only follow this diet perfectly to a T, you will never get sick. You will be able to prevent every disease from occurring and be able to reverse every single one. And that is a mistake to think that, especially because if you have done dietary perfection and then you still get a disease, who are you going to blame? God? No, yourself. And so people need to let that go and know, again, that there is such a huge part of whether or not we get a disease. In addition to our diet, there's our environment, the air we breathe, the water we drink, and again, the genetics.
Right.
It really does load the gun. Yes, diet and lifestyle can pull the trigger, but you can't. Your genetics make a big difference. Dr. Goldhammer always talks about that. It's your genetics will determine how long you live. It's your diet and lifestyle that will determine how well you
The
live.
quality. Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting. I mean, I know obviously you have a reputation in the health world because you teach people how to get healthy, how to stay healthy, how to lose weight. So I'm sure there are a lot of people who think of you as a health vegan.
Mhm.
But of course, at your core, which you talked about a lot when you were previously on the show, you are at your core an ethical vegan. You came into this for the animals.
And I wouldn't eat. And I talk to a lot of people. I know more people with cancer now than I ever knew in my life because I'm in these different support groups. And so a lot of times their oncologists or their doctors are wanting them to gain weight. right? Because I've myself lost weight, not from cancer, from anxiety. And so how do they tell us to gain weight in the traditional world? Well, Boost is a great way, right? And sure, it's basically like, I think, whey protein and oil
Ugh.
and stuff. But they want to make sure we get enough protein. And as everyone knows, you can't get enough protein from plants. So they want us to eat animal products, at least fish, right? And I'm not going to do that, even to save my life, because like George Bernard Shaw, I'm an ethical vegan at the core. And so I'm never going to do that. The thing that's so interesting is I didn't become a healthy vegan until, really Forks Over Knives came out, because I didn't know it was good for your health. I wasn't doing it for my health, right?
Right.
But what's interesting is because I've eaten a healthy diet for so long, I don't want to go back to eating junk food. And I could, because believe me, I have pity parties all the time. Like, well, I could eat whatever I want now because I'm going to die. And it's like, but I don't want the unhealthy food because my palate is such that, first of all, I love the food that I'm eating, but also when I eat unhealthy food, I just don't feel good. And since my goal in life right now is to maximize every moment of every day, I want to feel good. And, but like I said, Chrissy, people have always held me to this dietary standard of Goldhammer. I've never been there. So for example, one of the things, I don't create recipes with sugar, oil, salt. I just don't. And I do that for a variety of reasons. One, because I want to be able to continue to work at True North occasionally and write books that Dr. Goldhammer will sell. But also I just want to show people that even if you eat sugar, oil, and salt, the chances are you probably eat way too much and food can taste really good without it. And you can add your own. That's the thing about salt is you can add it at the table, right? So I don't create recipes with it, but I was never perfect with the salt because that would require me to make every single condiment from scratch, like mustard and ketchup and barbecue sauce, which I can do, but I'm too lazy to do. It's not like I sit there eating gobs of salt and I don't add it to my food, and I don't particularly like it very much, but occasionally I'll have a recipe that has a tablespoon of miso. Go shoot me, but I've never been that strict with that. I don't like to eat oil because it doesn't make me feel good, and it's very calorically dense. And if I'm going to eat fat, I want to taste it from a nut or a seed or an avocado. It's not like, I think it's going to necessarily kill me, but I don't like it. It's just, it makes cleanup hard. I don't like it. Of course I like sugar. Who doesn't like sugar? But the great thing is sugar is so easy to not eat. And I wrote a whole dessert cookbook showing you can use fruit, the whole fruit, and nothing but the whole fruit.
Right.
Now, that said, I didn't have to, but I chose to change my diet a little bit when I got down to 100 pounds, because that is really too skinny for me at 5'5". And I could not do it just eating the
That
food.
is really, really skinny. Wow.
Yeah, I'm up 10 pounds now, so I'm pretty much close to a normal BMI now. But the point I'm trying to make is, I'm not going to be teaching weight loss programs for very much longer. I have one more that I committed to a year ago. And again, I'm not saying what Dr. McDougall says is true, which he's always said all dieters are liars. But the diet that I ate to lose 80 pounds, if I eat that now, I cannot put on an ounce just eating fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes in any amount. I just cannot. It doesn't work. So I had to include the more calorically dense food in order to put on weight. And so what that looks like for me, and actually it's very delicious, is a little bit of bread. It's not, I have to be gluten-free, so the options are not like terrific out there, but I will have bread. I will have avocado, no longer afraid of avocado. I would have tofu, but I'm allergic to soy. So, I'll eat an entire small avocado with a meal, and it's not a problem, in a salad, on a sandwich. And, I don't pound down the nuts and seeds because I don't feel that great when I eat a lot of fat, a lot. I don't know why.
Yeah.
And also I do feel that for me, nuts and seeds are a little bit addictive. And once you pop, you can't stop. I'll eat them in things. You know what I mean? Like instead of eating.
Yeah. Like an ingredient rather than a snack. Yeah.
So I found my new favorite thing. This helps me keep the weight on. And it's actually one of my favorite foods in the whole world that I haven't been eating because it is calorically dense, and that is granola. And what people may not realize is that oats, when you cook them in water, are only about 375 calories a pound, which is why they're fantastic for weight loss and so filling because they're cooked in water. But when you're making oat granola, whether you make it in a dehydrator or an oven, you're using the dry oat. So now it's 1,800 calories per pound. and I'm sweetening it with dates, which are 1,300 calories per pound, and putting in dried fruit, which is about 1,600 calories per pound. So a little bit is really quite calorically dense, but it's so delicious. It's like eating cookies to me. And
Right.
I don't make it overly sweet. And so that's been like my favorite thing. And, I know
Mm.
some people are going to judge me saying, well, this isn't the time for dietary indiscretions. You should be doing Dr. Brooke Goldner's program and, or Chris, and be perfect. And, maybe I will do that again. But I feel like if 2 water fasts didn't shrink the tumor, are these more strict plans going to do it? I don't know. I could give them a try, but again, I do want to enjoy the life I have left. And I feel like, that's part of the problem when you're so strict for so long.
Mm.
It's like,
Right.
once the cow's out of the barn, it's like, oh, do I really want to go back to dietary perfection again, especially
Yeah.
given what I had? So, that doesn't mean I can't be talked into it by somebody really, really smart like Dr. Goldhammer or Dr. Goldner. And I'd be willing
Sure.
to do it as an experiment and give it a try.
Yeah.
But right
Yeah.
now it's the holidays, and people just have to get through the holidays doing the best they can. Everybody struggles. There's so much crap around. So if I'm going to eat some
Right.
gingerbread granola with Drina Burton's recipe, I'm going to eat it. And it's not like I eat, these egregious amounts, because I still eat my primary diet, which is lots of vegetables, lots of fruit, and lots of sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is tricky sometimes when we, kind of face these crossroads where, it seems like there are 2 options in some cases. It's like really buckle down even harder and then do even better and get even stricter, or loosen up. And they're like totally opposite directions, and it's hard to know.
I'm going to
But
be
it sounds to me like your approach makes a lot of sense, just, especially just based on the weight
yeah.
alone.
Right. I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Furman soon. I'm sure he probably would think I need to be more of a nutritarian. And there's, I can incorporate some of those principles and look for the most nutrient dense foods of the ones
Right.
I like
Right.
to eat. But here's my problem. And it's, I've always hated mushrooms. I'm a terrible vegan. I hate mushrooms.
I used to hate them, and now I like them, but I despised them growing up. So it's strange to me that I now
yeah.
eat them almost every day. But
It's going to save my life, I'll do it. Or maybe I can do a tea or something. But it's like, I
well,
don't
the texture can vary a lot depending on how they're cooked. Have
Yeah.
you had any?
I leave them air fried, but I know that air frying isn't. Oh God, the people that have said the reasons I got cancer. Did you know it's because I used an air fryer? That's one of the
Interesting. Isn't it funny how people suddenly have all the answers?
Yeah,
They've never dealt with your same problem, and they have no personal experience, but suddenly they have all the
and
answers.
they've never gone to medical school, so that's amazing. Yeah. But you have to have a sense of humor. That's really been what I've been focusing on is comedy, because I want to be like Norman Cousins, who cured himself with comedy.
Is that true?
Yeah, he wrote a book, Anatomy of an Illness, and I forget what the disease he had, if it was cancer, but he basically just watched a lot of the Marx Brothers movies, and he just laughed himself well. There's research that shows that laughing is fantastic for your immune system in general, but it does something with these T cells that just make them, the cancer fighting cells more prevalent. And that's why, and it sounds almost like I'm saying this as a joke, but after I was diagnosed, the first call I made was to my former, he's my teacher again now, but I hadn't studied in years. With Carrie Otis, my stand-up comedy teacher, I said, we need to start doing some comedy now,
And I heard you mention that, and I was so happy to hear that, because when you were on the show the last time, I really picked up on just some real regret about not spending more time in that world and not pursuing it more avidly. So I loved hearing that you were just delving back in. And I totally agree. I mean, laughter is just so powerful, and I personally don't get enough of it. And so I've also resolved to just tap into that more. And one of the areas that I love to focus on is satirical writing, Onion style, Babylon Bee. And I remember a few years ago, I wrote an article about, Big Pharma suing a comedy club for having the slogan that laughter is the best medicine, because it was a threat to Big Pharma about, the healing, and I think the story closed out with them saying, next people will be claiming that music is healing,
Well, it is.
But,
Even Dr. Barton,
right. And that's the joke, of course. But yeah.
Music is healing if you listen to the kind of music that's healing for you.
Right, right. So, well, we've got just a couple minutes left, but yeah, any final thoughts you'd like to leave people with, or I mean, not final, just final for the episode.
See, this is great. I love it. Never say to a cancer patient any final thoughts. This is exactly where it's supposed to go. I love that. I love that. I love that. Well, what I would say to people is just be kind, because people just make so many assumptions, and until that's old saying, until you walk a mile in somebody's moccasins, you don't know what they've been through. It's made me a much more kind person. And I thought I was pretty kind before, but now I cut people grace and give them slack, because you
Mm,
really don't know. I mean, when you think about that, I had to go 2 years alone in this journey, you know? And so I think people need to be kinder in the world in general, but especially if you're vegan and vegan for the animals. These vegans attacking other vegans, it's just, for clicks and views, and I don't know. So I would say, it's funny. I have this little thing right here, and I try to get through an interview without crying these days. It says, "Everywhere you go, leave a glitter trail of kindness behind you."
that's beautiful, and you're definitely doing that. And you always have glittery clothes and glittery hats, and so that's perfect for you.
I don't
That
know
is
if you
perfect.
my penis.
Yeah, oh, glittery. That's
I do. I love bling. I'm not a
perfect.
girly girl, but I do love me some bling.
Right, right. Perfect. Yeah. I know for me, and I would guess this would be true for you as well, is I love the health aspect of veganism, and I'm fascinated by health and nutrition. And so that's fantastic. But at the end of the day, I think if and when, I get sick with whatever ends up killing me, I will take a lot of consolation just from knowing that, the reason that I went vegan was because what's happening to non-human animals is just not okay. It's
I
not
know.
okay in any way, shape, or form.
Here's the thing, Chrissy, we're such a small part of the population, and it's like we can't even get along with each other when we all feel in our heart
Right.
the same things. But I'm like you.
Right.
It's like once I learned the truth, it's like, when you're little, you don't know, and you're four, you eat pizza, you don't think about it. But
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
once you know, you can't unknow. And the thing is many people just don't want to know. They don't tell me. I don't want to. Don't tell me. I really want to enjoy my steak. So yeah.
Right. Right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, and just for your courage and for your honesty, and also for what you've shown us about the vegan community too, because the fact that you didn't feel you could come out with this information, and that you just didn't feel safe to do so, that says a lot about the shortcomings of our vegan community.
I,
So thank
I
you
thought I
for
was
just
going to let people down.
mm,
And even people said, I've heard people say, well, if she could get cancer after vegan for almost 50 years, why should I? I mean, listen, you do the diet because it's like you say, if you're an ethical vegan, there's no other diet you're going to be able to do anyway. But it doesn't mean it's still not a healthy diet. I mean, think about all the other things it does for you. It gives you beautiful skin. It gives you clear thinking. It can reverse, things that we know it can reverse: heart disease, autoimmune disease,
yeah.
diabetes, in many, if not most people. Cancer is its own entity, and it will do what it will do. And even so, I believe that everything I've done up to this point is slowing it down. So, and that's what I'm going to keep believing.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure you're completely right. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on. Really means a lot to me and a lot to everyone out there, that you're speaking out just so courageously and so just, forthrightly about everything that you're dealing with, and for the courage and grace that you're showing in navigating this journey. You're a role model to a lot of us. You have been for a long time, and, especially now.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. And as you may recall, we close every episode by taking 30 seconds of silence for all the suffering animals, human and non-human, who desire, as we all do, safety, happiness, and the freedom to live out their lives without interference. So Chef AJ, I invite you to join me in 30 seconds of silence for the animals, and we'll conclude with the sound of the bell. Thank you, Chef AJ, and thank you, Posse. See you next time. Until then, stay strong and stay true.
Thank you.